My Nancy is a very home-oriented person. She is the consummate homemaker. She once said, as a couple times, said, if I was smitten with agoraphobia, it would be okay with me. You know, if she was around the house all the time, she loves taking care of the critters and picking up sticks and keeping the house. And I'm just such a lucky guy. I was an inveterate slob when she met me. And it's just a perfect match in that regard. I've known a young man since the day he was born, and he lived with his family for a while when he was a kid. And he knew what a slob I was. And he just couldn't believe it. When I got married to Nancy, and he's looking around the house, and he's going, wow, Uncle Bill, your ship has come in. But he couldn't quite believe it. He said, I'm going to make an unannounced stop sometime to see how the house really looks when Nancy's not expecting company. And I hope I'm there the day he shows up because I want to see his face. Sometimes, though, our strong suits come at the expense of other things. You know, I'm the traveler. I'm the guy that likes adventure. Traveling is not exactly Nancy's bag. Now, although I will say she's traveled quite a bit, been to Israel and Egypt and over the big pond to Europe several times, down to Mexico, up to Canada, of course. In America, she's been from the redwood forests to the Gulf Stream waters. And but usually because I'm dragging her along. Now, we just took a trip to Boston in the fall for 4 days, and we did everything I wanted to do. We went to Harvard Divinity School, and the old political science major and me wanted to go see the JFK Presidential Library. Never seen one of those before. And we had a kind of a quirky trip to Plymouth Plantation, but mostly she's following along, and happy to do that. My travel buddy, John Messner, and I, we kind of are the lowest of low rent when it comes to accommodations. Saving a nickel is kind of a challenge and a lot of fun. Nancy has a little higher standard when it comes to accommodations when she travels, but even then, it's never going to quite rise up to her standards of cleanliness and tidiness. And as a result, she'll have a good time, don't get me wrong, but she's always ready to get back home. About 2 days before it's time to get, I'm ready to go home. She's a very home-oriented person. The title of our message for today is This World Is Not My Home. And it is based upon an old hymn. You can go on YouTube and hear it sung a cappella. You can hear it popularized by Jim Reeves on an album of his. The rendition that Nancy likes is by the Chuckwagon Gang, and we have taken a few verses from that hymn, and we've reproduced them at the top of our bulletins. This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. The title of our message, The World Is Not My Home. Even though God has planted us here for a season, it is not a very long season. And the longer we go, the quicker that short season seems to be in the great grand scheme of things. But our eternal home is in heaven. And we ought to so live here that we arrive hereafter, because that is a place prepared for us. We ought to live like Nancy travels, with one eye open to the marvelous journey we're on, but the other eye peeled out for home, where we want to return, to get back home. Well, we find this is pretty much the attitude of St. Paul in our text for today, as he encouraged others to follow his example in that regard. He begins our text. Join with others in following my example, brothers and sisters, and take note of those who live according to the pattern that we gave you. Now that sounds a little boastful in a way. Live according to my example. But we have to understand it in the larger context of the letter that he's writing, because in the same chapter from which our text comes, What he's really saying is follow my example as I follow Christ's example. He says in just a few verses before our text, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him, following his example, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow to attain to the resurrection from the dead. Okay, first the cross, then the crown. And not only for Jesus, but for everyone who would follow him. In fact, Jesus himself said, no one follows me unless she denies herself, takes up her cross, and follows me. Paul is taking up his cross even while he writes to the Philippians. He's writing to them from a prison cell, one of 3 imprisonments that are recorded in his letters, probably the one in Rome, all because of preaching the gospel, all on account of his faith. And he's writing to thank the Philippians for their gifts to him, which helped to make the deprivations of incarceration a little easier to bear. But he's also writing to reassure them that he's doing okay. In fact, he uses the word rejoicing several times in our text. Yes, he writes, and I will continue to rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and the help given by the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage so that now as always Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by death or life. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I'm to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know. I'm torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. But it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. If it were not for Paul's sense of duty, he would prefer to depart and be with the Lord in glory. It's amazing what the hope of heaven can do for a person's attitude. Positively changes it. Even with the deprivations of prison life, Paul is rejoicing. And it's no wonder that he's winning people over left and right, even among the temple guard, to Jesus. Because, look, everybody's struggling in this world, and everybody wants to be joyful, and they see him with this transcendent joy, and they're thinking, I want what he's eating for breakfast. I want what's making him joyful, even in discouraging circumstances. The hope of heaven reorients a person's priorities. No longer does a person live for the things of this world. This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. My destination is the promised land. Unfortunately, that is not the case for those who do not have the hope of heaven. Paul continues in our text. For as I have often told you before, and now say again, even with tears, many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. The cross is not their bag. Suffering for righteousness' sake or any sake is not their bag. Okay, sacrifice is not their bag. Their bag is pleasure and feeding their carnal passions, feeding their worldly passions to the max. If it happens to be at the expense of others, so be it. Paul continues, their destiny is destruction. Their God is their stomach, and their glory is their shame. Their mind is on earthly things. Let's take those in reverse order. Their mind is on earthly things, on the stuff of life, homes and cars, motorcycles, and all the sorts of little toys that we have. Other times their minds are on earthly things like professional progress or socioeconomic status. Sometimes their minds are upon personal power and influence over others, winning at all costs and at all times. Their glory is their shame. Have you ever heard a guy bragging about his sexual conquests? You ever heard that? Probably more guys maybe have heard that stuff, but without any regard for his so-called partner's privacy or dignity. Some people brag. There was a recording made before the fall of Enron between two Enron employees. It was recorded, and they're bragging about the wholesale overcharging of Californians for their energy needs. Meeting they're within company policy, but they're reaching their targets. They're bragging about that. Now, some people brag about how hammered they get. I don't know if you remember back in college, that was a big discussion. Oh, you think you were hammered last night? I drank 6 kegs of beer, And of course, we brag about those things until life goes on and maybe gets a hold of us, and then our health and our families and our jobs become the casualties of that. They do it because their God is their stomach, their compulsive need to feed their carnal passions. Their destiny, Paul says, is destruction. Having fame, fortune, talent, looks, every head start a person could have in life doesn't save them. Elvis Presley had all that. So Michael Jackson did too. Two examples, people that killed themselves slowly because they couldn't say no. And they were surrounded by handlers to make sure that they wouldn't have to take no for an answer. They never learned about the hidden dangers of unrestrained feeding of their carnal passions. Now, nor did they learn the hidden benefits of restraint and sacrifice even sometimes. But Paul continues in our text, our citizenship is in heaven. This world is not our home. Our minds are not on earthly things. Our minds are on heavenly things, on spiritual things like faith, hope, and love upon Jesus, and sharing and caring and daring to be more like the Master ourselves, more forgiving, more merciful, and more laying up of treasures for ourselves in heaven rather than on earth. In the meanwhile, Paul continues, we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control will transform our lowly bodies so that they will be like his glorious body. Now we're venturing into an area that transcends human comprehension. In the New Testament, Paul roughly quotes from the Old Testament these words, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. What God has prepared. He said, I've prepared a mansion for you in heaven. Are there mansions in heaven? Are there pearly gates? Are there streets paved with gold? Are there angels with wings and halos? No eye has seen. Can we expect reincarnation? Can we expect rapture? Is there a hell? Is there something in between heaven and hell? No ear has heard. What do I think about heaven? Bill, what does Bill think? No mind has conceived, not even mine, not even the Long Island medium's mind has conceived, can conceive what God has prepared for those who love him. What we can see and hear and perceive is that there is now something rather than nothing. That is an interesting thing to ponder. Why is there now something rather than nothing? That's kind of amazing when you think about there's you and me, there's this planet, there's a solar system and this galaxy and the universe, maybe parallel universes, maybe infinite numbers of them. But why is there something rather than nothing? Why was there a Big Bang and hydrogen all of a sudden, and nuclear furnaces called suns, which produced heavier elements that made you and me. Why is there something now rather than nothing? Nothingness. Nothingness is overrated in the grand scheme of things. You've got to admit there's something about something, especially made out of nothing. If when we die it is cut to black, it is nothingness, God specializes in creating something out of nothing. He did it once. Who's to say He couldn't do it again? Paul says that the Lord will transform our lowly bodies so that they will be like His glorious body. I don't know what that means, but there's one comforting word in that statement, and that is the word glorious. John has written, what we shall be has not yet been made known to us. But we know that when He appears, we shall be like Him, for we shall see Him as He is. Everyone who has this hope in Him purifies himself just as He is pure. I have this hope that one day we will be with Him in glory. I have this hope that one day there will be a glad reunion with our dearly departed, never to part again. I have this hope that what lies ahead is so blissful and glorious that it transcends human comprehension now. Do you have this hope? Here's how you can tell if you have this hope. Whoever has this hope in Him purifies himself just as He is pure. Jesus was pure love and kindness and giving and forgiving. And if we are to purify ourselves like He is pure, we aren't going to pollute ourselves. We aren't going to self-destruct. We aren't going to degrade ourselves. We're going to purify ourselves as He is pure. We're not going to live with our minds set on earthly things. No, this world is not our home. Our minds are set on heavenly things. And that's how we will know whether or not we have the hope of heaven in us. And the hope of heaven can transform our orientation toward life and our perspective on things. Instead of bemoaning our fate, we find a way to rejoice because of the hope of heaven. And that's how we will know. I'd have you sing that song with me, except it's not in our hymnal today. But there are several like-minded hymns in our hymnal. I thought today we'd just sing 3 of them, or portions of 3, the first and last verse of 3 hymns. 2 of them are right across the page from each other. If you put a bookmark in that page and turn to the first one, I don't know what Ann Ramsey's going to do, but that's what I'd recommend that you do. And the first hymn is We'll Understand It Better By and By. Boy, we're going to sing verse 1 and 3 of all 3 hymns, the first and last verse. The last verse of that hymn would have been perfect for our sermon last week about temptation and testing. Didn't think about it then, but we better late than never. We get to sing it today. Let's rise as we sing our medley of hymns today.